Something incredible happened that day on Pentecost. Something absolutely incredible. You see, up until this point in the Christian scriptures, everyone was convinced that what God wanted was to scatter the people to the four corners of the earth to keep them out of trouble. You probably remember what happens early in the Hebrew scriptures. The whole world is said to have had a common language, a common speech. And Yahweh discovers them building a tower into the heavens so that they can make a name for themselves. Yahweh says in Genesis chapter 6, "If as one people speaking in the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." Now, Christianity is not the only religion to explain that it was God who separated the people. Neither the Abrahamic faiths are not the only religions to explain that it was God that did this. A Hindu myth tells of how not only differences in language, but also diversity in culture and customs came into being because of the punishment of a proud tree by Brahma. The story goes like this. There grew in the center of the earth a wonderful world tree, a tree of knowledge. It was so tall that it reached almost to heaven. The tree said in its heart, "I shall hold my head in heaven and spread my branches all over the earth and gather the men together under my shadow and protect them and prevent them from separating." But Brahma, to punish the pride of the tree, cut off its branches and cast them down on the earth. And when they sprang up as wata trees, as it is told, they made differences of belief and speech and customs prevail on the earth and dispersed the men and women all over its surface. There are many creation stories across the globe with similar themes. And whether or not we actually had a common language once upon a time ago or not, these many stories across cultures explain something that resonates with our experience, something that we know, something that is. We are divided in this world. We are divided in this country, in this state, in this city, in this church. We have different experiences in our family, different understandings of how we came to be who we are, different meanings that we make about what our purpose in life is. No single person can completely understand what it means to be somebody else. We cannot occupy their history, their experience, nor their place in space and time. Yet there is something very beautiful in our diversity. Like the many facets of a carefully cut diamond, we all reflect the light in our very own way. The interesting thing about the Abrahamic faiths is that the story does not end with the Tower of Babel. This morning, I want to suggest to you that the Tower of Babel is just one of three stories woven together. The story of the Tower of Babel, of Moses and the Ten Commandments, and Pentecost. So first, God separates us as a people because we are full of pride, and we learned actually to remain separated by joining with those who are like us and resisting those who are not. And from our separation, there were wars and isms, racism and sexism and terrorism, many of the isms of the world. All this is just actually our pride taking over once again. We were divided interpersonally as well. With a language and a culture also came writing and education. Our experience of the world began to be recorded and divided, more permanent instead of more fluid. At least in Western culture's history, we began to hierarchically judge our experience of the world, placing what could be categorized and classified experiences over experiences of the heart and of the spirit and of intuition. And then, in the Christian scriptures in Acts 2, something happens. The story changes. On the Jewish festival day of Shavuot, celebrated long before Jesus ever came, on the day that celebrates God giving Moses the 10 Commandments, and everyone hearing the story in Acts at the time would know that. On the day commemorating when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, something very strange happened to a group of Jesus' followers. Something that most Unitarians have probably for the most part dismissed, because I am sure that Jefferson cut it from his version of the Bible. On Pentecost, and Penta means 50 because it was 50 days after Easter, God evidently changes her mind. On Pentecost, a gathering of people from all over were together with a large group of Galileans, and the wind began to blow, which in biblical language means, wake up, something really important is going to happen. So the wind begins to blow, and the people saw what seemed to be tongues of fire separate and come down to rest on each of Jesus' followers. I like to imagine that those flames came down to their hearts. And the Galileans began to speak. Now, I'm sure since they were practical people, the first thing that they were telling one another was that they were on fire. The passers-by, though, heard a cacophony of gibberish, but the people in the room heard their own language coming from the Galileans, a message that resonated with their experience. God must have decided that even in our difference, with a little bit of help, we could, in fact, understand one another. It was a miracle. People with very different backgrounds, with very different cultures, different understandings, were all under the same roof, declaring the wonders of God in their own tongues. And everyone understood. Now, there were some skeptics, mind you. Not everyone was buying into this miracle. Some Unitarians in the room exclaimed, "They've had too much wine." But Peter set the Unitarians straight. It was only 9 in the morning, so the wine wasn't out yet. So what do we take away from this story? God separates us in Genesis, and then by miracle of miracles, we have an opportunity to be together in the same room, speaking in our own tongues about the wonder of God. This act in Acts has been mimicked and practiced by Pentecostals all over the world as a form of worship and a form of prayer. Pentecostals who report to feel their hearts open up in what they would call a baptism of the Holy Spirit, and they allow their voices, not confined by their own language, to become a tool of praise. Now, Pentecostalism is the fastest growing religion in the United States and the world today. And I am sure that living here in Oklahoma, you have been touched in some way by it.